I have a big medicinal herbal garden on the campus of the local community college. I had lots of herbal plants that needed a home, so I went ahead despite my misgivings. I was offered a recently rototilled burdock patch underneath a huge maple tree. We rototilled a bigger patch of the garden that would be in the sun. The soil is clay. I'm not used to working with clay. It's very different. I'm used to working with sandy soil. I felt the rototiller was compacting the clay soil, so we used a no-till method for the rest of the garden, which I'll explain later. I dug up the herbal plants in my front yard in another public garden I used to have and brought them over to our new garden plot. I really didn't have much hope for this garden. I planted really late in the season and I never worked with clay soil. These two sticks are two species of elderberry which I planted in the middle of the garden. I really didn't think they would survive the winter. I designed the garden to be a teaching garden. I made the paths 2 feet and the planting beds 3 feet. I wanted people to be able to listen to me talk without stepping all over the plants. Come spring, the garden flourished. The plants were really happy in their new home. The herbs did exceptionally well in the clay soil. I was surprised. Clay soil apparently retains water and it's filled with nutrients, the opposite of what I was used to working with, which is sand. I transplanted mullein, St. John's wort, and yarrow from the wild. They all did great in the garden. My original plan was to plant the herbs according to the body systems that they helped. For instance, I planted echinacea, elder, and elecampane in one area. Another row I planted herbs for the nervous system, valerian, wood betony, chamomile, lemon balm, and oats. And then I planted herbs for the digestive system in another row, which would have been spearmint, peppermint, and chamomile. That was a good plan, but I found that the plants needed different growing conditions and had different growing patterns. And also, the plants were perennials and they needed to be divided up on a regular basis, so the garden didn't really stay that way. Arnica and passion flower didn't do so well in the garden. It's too cold up north for that type of plant. I wanted to see if Tulsi or holy basil would grow in the northeast. I planted 4 different species of the plant. As you can see, they all did great. It was a long, hot summer, so it was a good summer. The species that grows best here is the Campor species. It's slow to start in the spring, but it'll continue to grow way into the fall. I cut it all summer long. I planted Solomon seal underneath the big maple tree. It usually does pretty good in both shade and sun. In the fall, we dug the burdock roots, which we had plenty of, and the dandelion roots. The essence of a public garden are the people who work there. Their energy and interest make a huge difference. One year, they decided to create individual 3x8 garden plots. It was interesting to see what they grew. One person wanted to see how the plants grew. Another person grew what she needed for harvesting. Broadfork is an amazing tool. You can clear a garden plot in no time. It doesn't seem like it would work that well, but it does. Check out my YouTube video on how to use a Broadfork on my YouTube channel. The hardest things for people when starting an herbal garden is deciding what they should plant. I always say start with the culinary herbs. You can't go wrong, and most of them are medicinal as well. This garden is a teaching garden. It's an herbal apothecary, not a historical record, as are so many herbal gardens that I've seen. We grow and we use the plants. One year I planted milk thistle. It's pretty far up north to grow milk thistle, but that year I had success. You use the seeds from the milk thistle plant. As you can see, the seeds are inside the mature flower heads. You dig roots in the fall. That's when the energy of the plant goes underground. It goes back into its roots, and the roots store their food and nutrients for the coming year. The beauty of a garden is how it changes every year, and it also changes with the people that work on it. It seemed that we were always expanding, creating new garden beds, and one year we created beds in the fall for the coming season, and we used the no-till method. You put cardboard down on the grass and then cover it with soil. In the spring, you plant your newly created bed. I watched how successful the small herbal gardens were for the students. So several years ago, I decided to create a 3-foot by 10-foot demo garden. I wanted to demonstrate that you don't need a big herbal garden to grow medicinal herbs. 1 or 2 plants are usually sufficient for your yearly needs. It's helpful for people to see the plants that they're thinking of growing. It's important to see the herbs as living plants. It gives a new perspective on what people have been using, such as in their tea bags or their herbal tinctures. Even more empowering is growing, harvesting, and using the plants as medicine yourself. It's also very satisfying. It never gets old for me that plants that grow in the wild and that you can grow in your backyard contain such healing qualities. One of the first things I have people do in the spring is to make an herbal bug repellent oil and an herbal drawing liniment. We deal with lots of bugs here in the North Country. I developed the herbal bug oil recipe to deal with the black flies. Now I have added extra ingredients to deal with the ticks. Drawing liniment combined with clay is to treat your bug bites. It's important to treat your bug bites, and it works topically for all types of bug bites and rashes. People don't realize how fast the plants grow in the spring. This is Joanne picking lemon balm. The plant is thriving and it's early spring. You pick the plants, especially the leaves, when the plant is in its prime. And as you can tell, this plant is in its prime. One of my favorite things to do in late June is to make St. John's wort oil. The best results come from picking the flowers and buds and maybe some of the leaves on a dry, sunny day. You'll be competing with the bees. You then soak the flowers in olive oil for about 4 to 6 weeks, and you end up with this beautiful red neon oil. You use the oil topically. I transplanted that St. John's wort plant from the wild in the fall for the coming year. The plants hang around for about 2 years and then they disappear, so you have to keep that in mind when planting your garden. You take that right home and
Take
put
it out of the
in.
oil. Don't squeeze it real hard because it's not totally dry. You know, when you go to strain it.
Okay, This year was a very unusual year because I saw very few St. John's wort plants around. Thank goodness I make a lot of St. John's wort oil every year and it keeps very well. It's beautiful, isn't it? Wood betony is one of my favorite herbs. It's a beautiful plant and it works to calm the nervous system but not to sedate it. You have to keep your eye on the lavender plant because you want to pick the buds as opposed to the flowers. I make a lavender oil out of the buds. When people think of herbs, they usually think about leaves, but flowers are one of the most potent parts of plants. These are some of the flowers I use in many of my herbal preparations. If I had any idea how big those tiny elder sticks would grow, I never would have planted them in the middle of my garden. I now have an elder tree in the middle of my herb garden, and I don't mess with it, I just plant around it.
Okay.
This is Elecampane. It thrives in the garden. I started with one plant and have divided up the plants every year, and now I have a whole row of Elecampane plants. As you can see, Joanne is digging the root in the fall. It's helpful to have a transplant shovel. It makes a big difference. You need to go all around the root and then with the shovel, and then you dig it out of the soil. Elecampane root has a long history of use with respiratory problems. It combines well with other roots such as marshmallow and licorice to make a lung tonic. Separating the plant roots. We're going to cut off the roots that we're going to use from the crown of the plant, and then we're going to replant the crown into the garden. You can do this with many plants. Marshmallow and echinacea are two that I've done this with. That way you don't kill the plant and you have plants for the coming year. The last 2 years were very quiet in the garden. 2021 was a beautiful year to garden, lots of rain and sunshine, but no people, no one to admire the plants. So I decided to do a project that I always wanted to try. I planted as many different herbal plants as I could in that 3x10 space, harvest them, and then made as many herbal preparations as I could with the plants that I harvested. Then I videotaped the whole thing. It was fun to do and it was a challenge, which is one of the reasons I now have a YouTube channel. I had to have some place to put all those videos. Gardens have always been part of my life. I love all kinds of gardens. An herbal medicinal garden is a special type of garden. I believe that the healing plants help heal the areas in which they are planted. As you can see, the garden is very different than it was years ago. I look at taking care of a garden as co-creating with the plants. Every year and season brings new discoveries. The core of my garden is that plants are being harvested and used. I hope this video inspires people to create their own herbal gardens, and I want to thank all the people who have co-created this garden with me. It never would have worked if it hadn't been for my wonderful volunteers.